Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to continue on with adding items to the YL1 project here. We're going to keep moving on from where we left off, which was the rear brake, brake rod and brake assembly moving forward in the bike. So we're going to start attaching a few odds and ends as we go, and I think the next major step is going to be adding the pistons, rings, cylinders, and cylinder heads to the bike, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But first, there's a few odds and ends that I would like to tidy up and wrap up from some previous videos, including the lens for the taillight. I'm going to change the washers for the taillight mounting bracket and the spring for the brake stay arm. So we're going to get into that now. If you've been with me for a while, you may recall a few videos back now where I mounted this taillight bracket to the fender using these Kawasaki bolts and Kawasaki washers that I had left over from another project. And my intent was to emulate reasonably so the original installation that I believe Yamaha used, which was a different kind of washer that I don't have four of. So I substituted these Kawasaki washers. Well, I have to be frank and honest with you, this really didn't kind of work for me. These washers, the bolts are fine, but the washers just looked too large. It looked oversized to me. So I went pawing through my inventory, and I did find some Yamaha washers, or Honda washers rather, right here. NOS are new. These aren't really NOS, they're new from Honda. They're still available. And I had these left over from some other project, probably the SL70 I did a few years ago, but I'm not sure anymore. So I opened one of them up, and there is the Honda washer, which actually is a little bit more delicate than the ones that I mounted on the bike from Kawasaki. They're just a little bit smaller all the way around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute these Honda washers for these large Kawasaki washers, basically for aesthetic purposes. So that's what we're going to do next. Now on the inside of the fender, I have also these same four washers. I'm just going to leave those in place, or in other words, I'm going to reuse those because I don't have 8 of these. I only have 4, and I'm not going to bother reordering, or ordering 4 more, I should say. So I'm going to pull these 4 bolts one at a time and replace this external washer that's visible with the smaller washers from Honda. The other 3 bags have not been opened yet, so I'm just going to cut them open. And there's the other 3 washers. You may recall these nuts have Loctite on them. I did that intentionally so they wouldn't vibrate loose. So I'm going to end up replacing that Loctite because it was just compromised. I think you can see there it's a little bit more delicate. It's not a huge improvement, but it is an improvement that I just feel better about. So now I'm going to go ahead and put just a touch of Loctite on here, and then I have to reattach the nut, and I'll do all 4 of them in sequence. This is one of those situations where just a little dab will do you. You don't need a ton of it. Now we've got the 4 larger original washers I used replaced with these little smaller Honda washers. It's not a huge difference, but these are a little more delicate, so it basically makes me feel better, and that's what's important. You will notice perhaps that I switched from using a ratcheting wrench here to a standard 1/4 inch 10 millimeter socket, 1/4 inch drive 10 millimeter socket. Worked a little bit better in this relatively confined space here, and I didn't want to bang into the paint and damage it, so that's been reattached. Next thing we're going to do is add the taillight lens. Again, you may recall in a previous video when I attached this, I had not received this lens at that point. Just got it a couple days ago. This attaches with a couple of 5 millimeter screws. These are new screws. They are not OEM Yamaha. Yamaha does not support this part anymore. But these are nothing more than 5 millimeter JIS head, Japanese industrial standard screws. And I keep them on hand. I keep an inventory of JIS screws I order from McMaster Car. They are a perfect match for the original design. In fact, I think they're still used on much of Japanese equipment still to this day, though I'm not sure because I don't work on modern equipment much. But nonetheless, I didn't have the right screws in stock. I think these are 3 millimeter longer than the originals called up by Yamaha, but it really doesn't make any difference because it just goes into this open space behind here, this bracket anyway. So a few millimeters difference in length won't make any difference at all. Now this lens happens to be aftermarket. I do not believe this is original OEM, but it is in very good condition. It was brand new. It was still in the package when I got it. So I want to make sure that that is in all the way around up against that rubber gasket, like that. First thing I'm going to do is put a little anti-seize on the screws. Probably know by now I'm a big fan of anti-seize. Spent too many hours of my life wrestling apart old assemblies that they didn't use anti-seize. So I'm a real believer in anti-seize. So again, this is nested all the way around up against the gasket. Insert those screws. This is a JIS driver, by the way. It's not Phillips. And I'm just going to snug those up comfortably, but I'm not going to over tighten them. If you over tighten these screws, you can crack this plastic. There's really no need to over tighten them. Just snug them up comfortably snug and call it good. And it's still centered well all the way around. So we've got the taillight lens on. Now we're going to move around to the right side of the swing arm, and we're going to install that brake stay arm spring. This is one of the two used springs that I had for this project. This was the best of the two, and I think you can probably see here I did clean it up and replate it, re-zinc plate it. Didn't come out perfect, but I think it's quite serviceable. Again, keep in mind, this is the, right there, this is the replacement spring that Yamaha specifies for this application, and clearly it's not the same spring, though, again, I probably could get it to work. And I think I was in error in my previous video where I talked about the spring having a cone shape or taper. Clearly it doesn't. I was mistaken on that. It's just a straight spring. But what we're going to do here, and this is a tough spot to video record, I'm just going to pull the cotter pin and pull the nut and washer off the back here that I temporarily installed previous, if you recall. See if we can get this washer off. Easier said than done there. So there's all the parts. This washer just goes on up against the swing arm. The bracket goes back on up against the spring, and I think you can probably see that right there. And then the washer nut I think I'm going to put a little anti-seize on that too, now that I'm thinking of it. And that arm is designed to float against that spring like you can see there. So I'm just going to use my 12mm ratcheting wrench to snug that nut up. I'm not going to tighten it, I'm just going to snug it up. And then I have a cotter pin. I'm going to just pre-start that a little bit so that I can tell on the back side. How it fits together. And that wire on that cotter key split pin is made from is thin enough and soft enough I can just bend it with my fingers. So we've got that component. I think that speaks to all the loose ends I had to date as we've been assembling the bike. Now we're going to begin adding additional components to it, starting here. Let me refocus the camera. Starting with the oil tank that fits here. Well, there's the oil tank that you saw a few videos back now when I repowder coated it, installed the sight glass that I polished, etc. And you may recall I left the original pipe on it. Outlet pipe right there. I did order a new one from Yamaha. This is it right here. You can still get that part. They actually call it a fuel pipe, so it's probably a piece of fuel line, truth be told. But it does look like it's the right tube. So I'm going to go ahead and use this for the outlet to the oil pump. However, I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to install a piece of clear, which you see right here. I keep quite a bit of clear fuel line and plastic type lines in my inventory of all different sizes. This is approximately the same size. ID inside diameter is this. I think this is about 5mm. I think this is around 3/16. It'll work though. But I'm going to install the clear line temporarily on the output side. And does anyone know why I would do that? Why would I use clear fuel line rather than the original black initially? Well, the reason is I want to see how the oil is flowing to the fuel pump when I start the bike. And if I have the black OEM outlet tube, I won't be able to see that. So this is going to be used temporarily, and then once everything is settled in and I'm confident that I've got a good oil flow, then I will replace this temporary clear with the original part from Yamaha, and that'll be quite a bit later on. But for now, I'm going to install a piece of clear plastic line right here, which by the way I just got at a hardware store. I buy almost all of this except fuel line, which this is not. This is not a fuel line. I buy it at local hardware stores. So I'm going to go over the bench and I'm going to cut this fuel line off. Obviously I'm going to save the clamps, and I'm going to make a section of clear here about the same length as the OEM black tube and install that, and then we'll come back. There's the oil tank with the vinyl outlet line attached. I did cut it a little longer than the original just to give me a little extra to work with in case I need to. This is very inexpensive material, so I don't mind wasting a little bit of it. I'll probably end up cutting it back 3 or 4 inches when it comes time to install it on the fuel pump, or on the oil pump. In terms of installation of the oil tank itself, it uses this rubber strap. This, by the way, believe it or not, is the original. It came with the bike. I cleaned it up. It's still very flexible and pliable. The plating on the buckle, which goes on the bottom here, is in very good shape. It's amazing actually that held up as well as it did all these years. At the top here, there's again a cotter pin or split pin. This is the original right here. And I did order a new one from Yamaha. They still support the part. You see there. And I did do a quick eyeball comparison to the original, and it does appear to be the exact same part. So I think we're good to go there. In terms of installation, it really is about as simple as it gets. Well, let me go back to the original, or the OEM outlet pipe here. This is the one I ordered from Yamaha. The clamps, there's an upper and a lower clamp. Upper clamp where it attaches to the tank, the lower end where it attaches to the oil pump. The original clamps, I just added them to the OEM pipe, and I'll put that back in the bag here, and then I will restaple it, staple it closed so that I don't lose those pipe clamps. Real easy to misplace, so I'll just roll this over and staple it and put it in my pending parts inventory. So we're going to go ahead now and install the oil tank. I'm going to start at the top. This is a very stiff rubber, and I don't believe I'll ever be able to, if I hook it at the bottom here in that rolled edge, I don't think I'll ever be able to stretch it around and insert the cotter pin. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going to pre-install this cotter pin. Like that. And then I'm going to mount the oil tank itself. Now you'll notice on the top of the oil tank there's 2 ears right here, and that strap will fit underneath those ears. They're just locators. As you can see there. Now, in order to stretch this, because this has to be stretched, to hook this bracket, this steel loop here, buckle if you will, underneath this rolled edge, what I did, and I've never done this exactly before because I've never had an oil tank like this, so I gave it a little thought, and I'm going to try to use this little puller to hook here like this so that I can pull that down far enough to get it to snap up over that metal rolled edge. If you've ever worked with springs, and many of you probably have, like in brake shoes and return springs on center stands and side stands, they can be an absolute bear to stretch. So I keep coat hanger wire around. It's quite strong. You can buy commercially made spring pullers. In fact, I think I used to have one somewhere that was shaped similar to this with a hook on each end, one end for your finger, a big loop. think I broke it actually a number of years ago. But now I just use steel coat hanger wire like you see here. And I had this in the shop, so I just bent it in a U shape. And you can see it's been bent many times before. And I'm going to hook those like that and see if this will work. So you're going to see real time, firsthand, whether this is going to work or not. So let me reposition the camera to a better angle to try to give you a shot of what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do my best not to block the camera with my head. But we're going to now see together how this is going to work. So bear with me here a minute. There. You can see what that looks like. Chip just a touch of the paint right here. I don't know if you can see that on the video. But I'll touch that up later. But I think that actually worked pretty good outside that little tiny chip. That did not happen when you heard that snap, by the way. I don't know exactly what that snap was, but we've got the oil tank now installed. I'll go ahead and open the ears up or the legs up on the cotter pin, split pin here at the top. There. So that oil tank's not going anywhere. So go ahead and put the cap back on so I don't lose it. And as you can see, we have the oil tank installed along with a temporary output line, and we'll worry about that part of it at a later time. While I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and install the cap for the high tension lead that goes to the spark plug. This is the original one that came off of this coil, and it's not in perfect shape. Mechanically or physically, it's okay. It's not rusted through or anything. I did replate it and clean it up, but it is quite pitted. But it'll be serviceable for now until I come up with a different solution. So again, in order not to lose it, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in place right now. I'm going to use just a little dielectric grease around the edge of here just to make it a little slippery. So it just fits together like that, and that's a self-centering design. And then it just threads on. We're going to go ahead and install the rubber foot peg covers here. We got two brand new ones from Yamaha. These are still available, believe it or not. There's the part number. I'm really surprised they're still available because when you look at the parts diagram and look up the part number, these are used on only older bikes from the mid-70s and back, but I didn't have any trouble getting them. Whether they're true to the originals or not, I'm not sure. I didn't have to dig the originals out of my storage bin, but it really doesn't make any difference because this is what I'm going to use. I think what I'm going to do first is put a little dielectric grease, again my favorite, on the post itself. Just make it a little slipperier for that rubber to fit on. WD-40 will also work. WD-40 works really good on handlebar grips. And I'll get this started like that. And then using my brass mallet, see see if we can't get this like that. To be honest with you, the main reason I put these foot peg rubbers on now rather than later is to protect my head. I'm going to be working down in here more often and perhaps looking up underneath, especially when I get into the side covers. And I want to protect myself from the end of that foot peg bar sticking out. And I don't want to bang myself in the head. So that's the only reason I'm putting them on right now. So I'm going to go to the other side and do the same. Well, I think this will be it for today's video. We've done a couple of tidying up projects. The lens, mounted the lens on the taillight, replaced the washers on the taillight mounting bracket. We installed the replated spring here, right there, on the rear brake stay arm. We mounted the oil tank. We put the cap on the right side coil, high tension wire lead mount, and we installed the driver foot pegs. I do have passenger foot pegs, by the way. I'll put those on another time. But so today was primarily a little miscellaneous and cleanup items. Next, I think we're going to move on to installing the cylinders, pistons, rings, cylinder heads, etc. on the top end of the bike. And we'll pick up our next video with preparing to do that installation. As usual, any questions, notes, comments, drop me a note. Otherwise, thanks for watching.